What could I need from my neighbor? Instead of trying to think of things to ask her for, I just said that, but try to think of a way to turn it around. Bake some cookies or something, and go knock on the door with a plate of them, and say you wonder if she could do you a favor, and take them off your hands before you guys eat them all for dinner. Or next time you're headed to the market, knock on her door and ask if you can pick her up anything. If she says oh, she was gonna go later, or has a big list, ask if she wants to come along, and then you can both corral the kids. Or next time you're going to the park, ask if she and her kids want to come along. This is how you make friends with adults, ha. Sigh a cup of sugar, there's a reason it's timeless. Someone to hold the other end of a tape measure. This is a real example of me borrowing my neighbor a few days ago. I needed to measure my big window, but couldn't keep the tape measure ridged. She was out in the garden, so popped in quickly to give me a hand. Anything like that, really. She's being neighborly. All you have to do is say thank you. There is no need to dissect her words. If you go on vacation, ask her to take your trash bin back from the road on garbage day. Also take in the mail if you are gone for a few days. In the summer, ask to borrow a gardening tool she has and you do not. Does she have a recommendation for a decent restaurant? Do either of you have a garden? Swap vegetables when you have too many. Of course, you have to reciprocate. My neighbor borrows eggs from my chickens, and she borrowed my battery jump starter when her battery died. She's mowed my front yard before when I've had surgery. I have a cherry tomato patch in the front yard she's free to pick from. She watches my cats and chickens when I go on vacation. Seems pretty balanced. Best neighbor I've had in my almost 25 years here. Do not leave your kids with her to babysit, that's not what anyone wants. I have old coworker that it's now my neighbor and lives down the hall from me in my apartment building. About a month ago I was really sick with the flu and it came on pretty suddenly. She knew I was sick and was running errands. She called me to ask if I needed anything. At first I turned her down and said I was fine. Then after a bit I changed my mind and asked her if she could pick me up some orange juice and chicken noodle soup since she was going to the store anyway. I didn't have any, and that sounded really good. She got some for me and it really helped. I live alone and my nearest family is an hour away. A couple weeks later she got sick. I returned the favor and got some stuff from the store she really needed and was too ill to get herself. Being neighborly can be being on friendly terms, or it can having each other's backs when needed. It was comforting to know she was looking out for me. Make something tasty like a pie and go knock on her door and tell her you need help eating it. I bet she'd love to have you over for tea, coffee, and a chit-chat, with or without the kiddos. Sex, drugs, an alibi. You know anything. That you're bored and in need of a friend is the perfect reason. She probably is too. What could I need from my neighbor? An alibi. What if your car is in the shop and you need a ride? It's what neighbors do. I had a neighbor couple in their 80s mow my lawn without asking them, for an entire summer when I was getting cancer treatment. After the husband died, I helped her with anything I could, just because I was so grateful. You never know what you could need, and helping in return made me feel good. I've needed help with my baking. The recipe I had made 2 loaves. Do you want one? I made 2 dozen cookies and won't eat them all. Do you want a dozen? My neighbor got a pie today. They're having a hard time and my husband bought the wrong pie filling. I'm picky, but the neighbors didn't care. Free pie. I once locked myself and my phone out of the house. Was handy to be able to pop next door to the neighbor and ask to use their phone, so I could call my partner. Whenever I make soup, I make a lot of soup, so I have extra to take to my elderly neighbors. It's a low-cost way for me to help them out. Then I let him get my mail if I go away so he can save his pride. Win-win. Most people would feel comforted if their neighbors were nice enough to say that to them. I'm a female and I live alone in a house, and the fact that I've met my neighbors and I could go to them if I needed anything is incredibly reassuring. It's just comforting to know that should there be an emergency where I needed the assistance of somebody, there are people around me who can help. For instance, my water heater decided to bust itself open and send water into my garage, flooding it, soaking everything I had stored on the ground in the process. I was able to send a quick text message to my immediate neighbors telling them I knew it was late, but if anyone was up and could perhaps spare 15 minutes to help me pull things out of my garage, I'd appreciate it. Those neighbors saved me and my valuables that night. Read a story on here where a person asked their poor neighbor for a cup of sugar or flour. Their child said, "Dad, why did you ask for flour when we had some?" His response was something like, "They are always asking us for help and have to feel they are a burden." I asked for something so small that would not be a burden, but would give them their dignity back for always being in need. It made them equals in a way. Go ahead and ask for that cup of sugar and say something like, "I was trying to make some cookies and messed them up. Do you have a favorite cookie recipe?" Every elderly woman has one, I would guess. Then they feel valued, and you have opened the door to a reciprocal relationship to build from. Advice: how to do something in the garden or tips for around the house. One neighbor gave me some great tips on poison ivy removal when I asked if they also had some in their yard. They also told me a soap to buy that would wash off the oil if I came into contact with it. Another neighbor is going to show me how they prune their bushes so that I can do my own. Borrow a cup of sugar, return with a friend. You'll know when the time comes. Sometimes you don't need anything, then suddenly things change and you need help. Invite her over for coffee and homemade blueberry pie. Maybe you need 15 minutes away from your kids after your so gets home from work and her daycare kids are gone. Have a cup of tea, coffee, glass of wine, some tea of adult interaction for both of you after a busy day. Maybe she is looking for some adult company. A chat and a coffee? Maybe ask if she would like that, and that way you could strike up a neighborly friendship.